From the STEM Global Action Studios in New Orleans, this is the Let's Talk STEM with Dr. Mackie Podcast. STEM Global Action is a national leader in creating STEM-based learning activities and delivering them virtually and in communities around the globe.
Hello and welcome to this latest episode of Let's Talk STEM. I'm Ken Sang, your moderator. Today we're going to have another great episode where we're going to talk about all the ins and outs of STEM education and careers. Before we get started, let's say hello to our host and leader, Dr. Mackie. Hi, Dr. Mackie.
Hey, Ken, how you doing today?
Doing very well. Thank you very much.
I'm excited because today I get to talk to the amazing Shawna Young from the Scratch Foundation, who has an amazing career of fighting and battling and pushing for diversity, not only in coding, but in STEM education from MIT all the way to the community. I mean, you know, we talk about STEM a lot and we talk about what needs to happen, but it's great when I can bring on actual practitioners, not people just thinking pie in the sky, but people who are thinking and then putting into action those things that we need to be doing for our children. So that's why we have Shawna Young on here today. So Ken, I'm not gonna hold us up. You know, last Friday I went alligator hunting and I caught an 8-foot alligator. So maybe I'll work that into our conversation today. But let's get to Shawna.
Let's make sure that we talk about the alligators. What would a conversation about STEM be about without talking about alligators? But Shawna, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get started. Tell us who you are, your STEM journey, and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Mackie, and so much, Ken. My name is Shawna Young again. Wow, how to start the journey. I've always loved science and engineering and math. I don't know if I really knew what engineering was. I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina. It's a military town. And I was always inquisitive in nature. And I just remember in middle school and high school, I wanted to do something that was challenging. I always was enthusiastic being in chemistry class or math class. My brain was working really, really hard trying to problem solve. And I went to a predominantly Black high school. All of my schooling was around a lot of amazing, intelligent Black folk and friends. And so I didn't experience this thing of like, you can't do that because it's not for you. And then I went to Howard for undergrad, where I saw more Black excellence in all the spaces. And so I remember when I was thinking about what I wanted to be, I only knew certain careers. Like I knew about being a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. I didn't know about other careers. So I wanted to be in something STEM-based. And I navigated this way of majoring in chemistry at Howard University because I knew that I wanted to possibly become a doctor, like many people. It was my experiences at Howard that helped me realize that there were so many things out there I could do, doing internships at GE and other places, that just because I enjoy science and math, there were many, many pathways. And then I remember that my teachers made a difference in what my enthusiasm for STEM. So once I realized after my first job at GE that I didn't want to be in corporate America. I wanted to be teaching, and it was okay. I wanted to be that person that had an impact on the next generation of kids and children going into STEM. And I recognized also how much of an impact my chemistry teacher, my biology teacher, my physics teacher had on me. I wanted to be like them. And so the education piece was huge. And I recognize that every single day, teachers make a difference in the lives of our children, and more teachers that we can have, they're enthusiastic about STEM, that ensure that our kids know that they can do this regardless, made a huge difference. So that transition from, I want to have a career in STEM, maybe I want to be a doctor, to, you know what, I want to teach and be around kids every day. And eventually I learned there was this whole nother world that Calvin and I are in now around STEM access. And I think it's important that we call it STEM access, which is different than college access. A lot of brown kids go to college, but they're often moved out of STEM spaces and places for different reasons. So STEM access is a very specific type of work that we're doing. And I really appreciate what Calvin does in Louisiana and around the world, and seeing him, his STEM Saturday, the Saturday picture he showed me, it just warmed my heart. And so I can talk a lot about this. My journey is like, I was an enthusiastic, inquisitive kid, loved science and math, became a teacher, pivoted over to being on the side of creating opportunities in STEM for kids of all backgrounds, especially brown kids, and knowing that that's really, really important. So I'm gonna pause there and see if that somewhat answered your question.
No, it's great. Go ahead, Dr. Mackie.
Now, Shawna, I know you're a proud graduate of Howard University, but I'm a proud graduate of Morehouse College, and we're going to limit the number of times you can say Howard on this presentation, on this podcast today. My son is at Howard in the engineering school, and that's still kind of rubbing me wrong, but he's getting a great education. So, but you talked about something, STEM access, right? And I know about your previous work. When we first met each other years and years ago, you were running an opportunity office at MIT. I'm like, MIT, right? And there was an access problem at MIT. After that, you ran, the Duke Tip program. My kids have been in Duke Tip, all of their lives. And again, you was working on access to make sure that kids get access to the tools that they need so that they can perform to have this access into STEM. And now you're running the Scratch Foundation, which is another form of STEM access. But when you look at it, right, the work I'm doing, the work you're doing, the work other people are doing, what is the biggest challenge you think that we have to overcome? Because for me, I had a moment this weekend, and I had a conversation with somebody, and the belief gap is amazing, right? We out here working to create access for people, and it's being undermined by the fact that parents don't. There was a research that came out that said parents know about STEM, but they don't believe it's for their kids. I talked to funders, and I want to talk about the soft bigotry or low expectations, because they want to fund, this soft stuff rather than the hard stuff that we know our kids can do. So my whole thing is, how do we change this mindset of the belief gap that this is for our kids are capable, and our kids can do it?
I really appreciate how you frame the belief gap. And, you and I have been in this work for a long time. One of my good friends and mentors, Joy Lawson Davis, talked about doing gifted education access work for over 40 years. And we're still having the same conversations about which kids are possible to be gifted. And I think for me, it's not a gap. I started writing about this work around opportunity embargo, where as I look at the work that you and I have done and others in our field, the intentional work we do, the hard work we do, the amazing work we do, and we're still having similar numbers or worse, especially coming out of the pandemic. I think it's not a gap. It's an embargo. It is intentional where we are, and the inequities were sort of designed, but we're surprised that we have them. So if we can start with like accepting or reconciling our starting points, and then build out frameworks and structures and support based on, and then eliminate and really destroy some of these structures that were created in such a way, instead of creating more programs. And I do think programs are really important, but programs minus systemic change and breaking down these intentional barriers for communities, multiple communities, and not just communities of color, communities based on the socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as their racial backgrounds, as well as their geographic locations. We're going to still be talking about this 10 to 15 years from now, right? And so that was like an awakening for me as a person. Like, if I just raise more money, if I accept more kids, we will close this gap from the achievement gap, which was a horrific framing, to opportunity gap, to let's get real around what we're fighting, which is an intentional embargo. And it's okay as long as we accept whatever it is and start to build out strategies that are going to be a full throttle approach to eliminate more of these inequities, which I agree with you, Calvin. Some of that is it is mindset, especially when it comes to the kids we're working with as well as their families, but that mindset is set in the society that they were
That's right.
that we existed, which was to say that certain folk have a certain amount of privilege and access, and some don't. Many don't.
Oh, you got me fired up now, because I mean, look, it don't, it doesn't take much, but the bottom line is what we do at STEM Saturday, right? We ask two questions: what's your zip code, and do you have allergies? And and evaluators come down there like, you need to ask this. What about this? And I'm like, no, I want your zip code, because I want to show to the politicians and whoever going to evaluate us that we're taking kids from all over the city, from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. And I want to know what you're allergic to, because I'm going to feed you. But every last person will be exposed to STEM in the same way. And there have been so many unintentional consequences that we didn't expect. I mean, parents calling us crying. I mean, parents saying my kid is on the spectrum, and I've never seen my kid participate in a group like this where he wasn't made to feel like some otherness. I mean, parents are coming saying, look, my kid go to school every day, and every day they tell him what he can't do. He come here, and for 3-4 hours, you all have no problem out of it. So what we've done is that we've created a tribe where these kids can find themselves, and they can find a pathway, and they're not poked and prodded, right? We're not here to judge them in terms of what they can do. We give them something, they do it, and they feel good about themselves. When they finish, they can go home and say, Mama, Daddy, look what I did. And that's how we change the mindset. And it has to be systemic. That's why we're doing it in urban New Orleans. Now we're doing it in rural Illinois and rural Louisiana. We're doing it with Black, white, Asian, Muslim kids, whoever. Come one, come all, STEM for all. And what we're really doing is that we're really exposing some people. We're exposing the system. And I'm going here because that's the way we have to disrupt the systemic institutions, right? That say these kids don't do STEM, or these kids do STEM. Now, I frame that because you're with the Scratch Foundation, and in the computer science world, we know that something like in 2017 of the 70,000 computer science degrees given, less than 8% went to Black and brown kids. If you look at Google, you look at Facebook, all these technology companies, less than 8% of all their workers are Black and brown. If you really disaggregate them, you're talking about single percentage for every ethnic group besides whites and Asians. But in this whole thing to give coding to all kids, we have to be careful there too, because some people, your background is chemistry. Your first degree was chemistry. My first degree was mathematics. Then I went into engineering. So some people just think if we give our kids coding, that'll be enough. And I'm one to believe that everything happened at the intersectionality of different areas. So I won't do for any other kids what I refuse to do for mine. I gave my two sons coding, but I gave them other stuff so they can understand how to solve problems and then apply the coding to whatever it is they need to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And at Scratch Foundation, we focus a lot on creative learning, how kids learn. You'll hear me say this even more. Coming out the pandemic, I am very passionate around inequity in how kids learn. And so we focus on the fact that we want kids to be able to share their ideas creatively. And we think about creative learning, it actually starts with an unplugged activity of a child or a group really maybe creating a project that's related to a summer memory that they really, really enjoyed and love, and they share that and they work on it together. And then we talk about, well, how could you take that project and build something in Scratch or Scratch Junior? And then share that in online community or share that back with your family. And so there's a meaningful experience that is aligned with and anchored in then this thought process and computational thinking and sharing your ideas that kids have that we all care about. So for us, it's more than a coding platform, which there are a lot of coding platforms that exist. And I think it's important to have coding platforms. Ours is connected to the research done at the Lifelong Kindergarten Group and our founder, Ms. Resnick and Natalie Rusk at MIT Media Lab, and a learning philosophy that's all about creative learning, as well as an online community. We have over 15 million kids every year that share their projects online. Last year, we had over 42 million kids be active users on our platforms. And active users means for us that they actually made a project in Scratch or Scratch Junior. And that all those things make a difference. We're in over 200 countries around the world. With all that said, we know that we can do more when it comes to inequities and access and engagement. Our founder, Mitch Wessing, says a lot like, Shawna, access is not enough. It's the starting point. We are free of charge. But once you have access, you know about Scratch, how are you engaging in it and using the tool to really elevate your understanding and share your ideas? And so I think that coding is something, it's another language that we want our children to understand and have. And at its core, we want children to not be consumers of technology. We want them to be creators of technology. And so, you know, our team is inspired by that type of work. If you go in our online community, you see all kinds of studios with every topic possible, over 74 languages Scratch is translated into. So language access, STEM access, coding, all that matters. And we're also working on, when you go into our platform, do you see sprites that look like you and your community? Do you see backdrops look like that? We know there's more there. We're spending a lot of time also on accessibility. How do you make a block coding platform accessible for diverse learners? All those things are really important for us personally as an organization, but also as we're coming out of this, or we continue to be in a pandemic.
You know, I like how you talked about unplugged learning activity and creative learning. Because again, that's what we're trying to do at STEM Nola. And what it came from, when I was 9 years old, my uncle, God bless his soul, passed away this year. But I am because he were. When I was 9 years old, he gave me an Erectus set. And while he and my dad sat there, you know, with their libations, I built a little car, put it together with a rubber band on the motor, and the car ran across the floor. And he jumped up and said, that boy's going to be an engineer. And I sit here the day before you with 3 engineering degrees because he said so. And I bring that up because so many kids are not allowed to explore. They're not allowed to have unplugged activities where they just can create. And that's what I was trying to get to, right? We want to give low income, low resource kids the freedom to be. You know, we are human beings before we are human doers. A lot of STEM and STEM education, I keep telling people I kept my kids away from STEM education because STEM education a lot of time is structured and about doing. And STEM, for me, is about becoming. First, you have to be before you can do. And what we try to do on these Saturdays with these kids, I mean, we had, and thank you, Scratch Foundation funded our camp that was overrun with kids this summer. And we gave the kids the opportunity to just create, whether it was with 3D printers or whether it's with, you know, with apps, or whether it's with their robotics. Very seldom do we tell them, do this. We say, here's the thing. Here's the capabilities. Let's see what you come up with. And that's what we do on STEM Saturdays with kids. We bring them in. And that's why the parents love it. That's why the kids love it, because they get to be. And whatever they be and create, they get a high five. And you know, and they know they had a great experience. And then they believe what they can do. And that's, you know, that's why STEM education is so important to that so-called education right now. You know, you have people talking about humanities and STEM, and we need more humanities. And I'm like, we need it all, because STEM informs humanities as well as the humanities inform STEM. So I don't think we should be separating those things. And you all do an amazing job of bringing together that creativity with that critical thinking and the critical doing together on your platform. So I applaud you.
One question for both of you. I want to let's talk about like what's going on in the real world today. Like just last week, the NAEP, what's known as the Nation's Report Card, came out, and it showed that 9-year-olds across the country, the test scores are going down in math and science to a 30-year low. So how do you all, as people who are, you know, pioneers working on these issues, how do you respond to a teacher, a parent, when they see that kind of stuff and you're telling them we need more of math and science? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, So I didn't grow up with standardized testing, but I was a teacher in the height of it. You know, I was one of those people, I don't always share it, but you know, I get bonuses based on how my kids perform on a standardized test when I was teaching in North Carolina. And I remember the first time I had to do it, I was like, my heart was heavy. I'm like, how do you do this? And so my brain went to inquiry-based learning. I would spend, as others were like getting ready for like sort of drill and kill, I was spending an immense amount of time creating these hands-on activities for my kids in my classroom and having stations. And every time they would come in, we'd have a hands-on activity, a lab, and we were prepping for their, you know, end of year standardized test based on my personal belief that if I prepare you for how to think
there you go.
critically, it doesn't matter what people ask you. You'll figure it out, right? And so I really think there's something around the how kids learn. Yes, what is important, but after the what, there's huge inequity in the how. Went to public school myself. I'm a public school advocate. My daughter goes to public school now and has her whole time. She's a junior in high school, but we have still gone through this process of what does private school look like, which means she goes to the private school and she gets to spend the day, and she, you know, you can feel the privilege when you just walk on the campus. It's anchored in it. But then when she comes back, she's like, I remember we were looking at high schools and she's like, Mommy, she was in 8th grade. She's like, I'm in 9th grade English now. And I went to observe a 9th grade English class. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm supposed to already understand this because I'm a year up. And just how kids are learning, this is before the pandemic, was different. And we cannot hold this idea of creative learning and just critical thinking to only kids who are in certain classes or certain schools or certain socioeconomic backgrounds. And race or not, there's inequity there. And so that's what I'm passionate about when I think about the work we're doing at the Scratch Foundation, because we are forming communities of practice. The Scratch Education Collaborative is one of those. We now have 130 organizations around the world that we're partnering with because they're in communities, and Calvin and STEM Nola is one of our partner organizations, and helping model that work around the world, because we know how kids learn makes a huge difference. And we often sort of struggle with this idea of how scripted should we be? Because like Calvin said, to us, it's not overly scripted. It's creating a space and environment where children and educators are learning and thriving in that space as they work through their ideas and share with each other.
Yeah. You know, when the NAEP came out, the results say not only have the reading and math scores declined to a 2-decade low, but they saw no demographic group showed gains. So regardless of your race and your socioeconomic background, the COVID challenge really caused, you know, a loss for everyone. Now, there was disparities within those losses because the Black and brown and the poor kids, you know, declined even more so. But it just goes to show you that everybody was impacted. So if everybody was impacted, we should be thinking about what we need to be doing for everyone. Now, in low-income communities and schools, and I've talked to people, they're thinking about drilling and killing. And I'm like, no, absolutely not drilling and killing. So we partner with the largest school district in Louisiana, and they have this summer bridge program. And we say they stop calling it summer school. You know, it's going to be a summer bridge. Many parents need to send their kids somewhere anyway to get, you know, childcare. So let's make it like a summer camp, like any other kid would go to a summer camp. And they're doing ELA and math during the morning, and they've hired STEM Nola to come in and do these hands-on STEM activities in the afternoon, because we believe hands-on mean minds-on. So again, we are trying to work with the school districts and give them a pathway to give these kids the freedom to explore so they can create, so they can develop their critical thinking skills, such that when they go into ELA and the math classes, now this stuff begin to make sense because they've had this exposure that otherwise they can see why it's relevant to them. But I'm afraid that what most nations are going to do, especially with the COVID money, is kill and drill. And many teachers stay away from the hands-on STEM activities because they just don't know. They don't know what to do. And that's why they need support. They need support to do what they do, but then they need support with other people coming in, like the Scratch Foundation and others and ourselves, to give them, that additional stuff to help them with what they're trying to do.
Very good. So, Shawna, I know you've had a long career in equity, equity, diversity, and things like that. So, tell us about how, in your opinion, how important it is that the STEM field be equally represented across all demographics.
Representation matters. People seeing themselves in leadership, in organization, in career fields makes a difference. It's in particular for this generation, I would say. I think Calvin and I are growing up, it's like, we were sort of trailblazers and we often didn't see ourselves in lots of places. When I talk to my daughter, that's the first thing she looks for. The first thing she looks for is like when I go into it, and not that it's all Black or all female, but that it's literally diverse. She wants to be around people from all different communities and backgrounds as she's learning or doing something, or even if she's playing basketball. And so, and I don't know if we fully realize the impact of folks seeing themselves in a role or in a space or an industry until after, right? So we have to think in advance on that. I remember when I was teaching science, I became a physics teacher in North Carolina. And after my first year teaching, one of the mothers came up to me. I had another Black, amazing woman student in my class. She was phenomenal. And at the end of it, her mom told me, Shawna, my daughter is going to Howard. Said it again, Dr. Mackie.
I'm coming.
My daughter is going to Howard and majoring in physics because of you, because you were her physics teacher and you went to Howard. And it's just like, that was the moment where I was like, it was very personal. And I was like, that was almost 20 years ago. The importance of models, role models. And the next question is, how do we get there? Because when we hear often, there's just not enough folk in the pathway, because I don't want to call it a pipeline. But then on a daily basis, Calvin and Dr. Mackie and I see tons of kids with tons of ability to be in any field they want to be in. There's something happening as they're going through their journey, which we might call a STEM journey. And how do we think about how do we change some of those dynamics from someone being told in a college class, well, you made a B-, maybe chemistry is not for you, or being asked why they're in a class because they just don't look like everyone else in the class. Those things like literally still happen. I know we think it was like, it must have been 15 years ago. That's still happening for our young folk. And so I think representation matters. I think the more that we can have a broader understanding of what does it mean to be a technologist or be a STEM advocate, you don't have to have just majored in computer science or done a specific type of field. But I personally believe, and particularly when we think about computational thinking and careers in computer science, that we need lots of folk with this understanding across the board. I don't know, Calvin, if you want to add your thoughts there.
Oh, I mean, you're on point, and I definitely believe representation definitely matters. As a matter of fact, at STEM Nola, what we do, we say we focus on K-12 kids. We surround the K-12 kids with college kids, and we surround the college kids with STEM professionals. And we call that vertical mentoring. But what it does is that at these events, the kids get to see themselves at all different stages of life. So not only do they see this, this woman engineer, but they understand in order to become her, I got to get through these 4 grade bands and I got to go to college. Can I go to college? Then they see college students who are working with them. So I believe the scale of the solution must meet the scale of the problem. So there have been, like the young lady said, I'm becoming a major in physics because of you. There have been so many kids who said, no, doc, I am an engineer because of you. So that means I got to put more me and yous in front of kids because we can't be everywhere. And that's why we marshal. I believe there's a lot of people with interest in giving back to communities, but they just don't have a pathway. So we've created this pathway for STEM professionals, I say, to come home so kids can see, touch, and feel them and have a conversation with them and know that they're real people just like them, who had a STEM journey just like them. But more importantly, yeah, they had a STEM journey just like them, but now they have them. So they can get their email, they can get their number, and they can call them when they're in another situation where they don't see anybody like them. They know they've met somebody like that they can get back to. And that's why disrupting these institutions and these barriers are so important. And when people say they don't understand what we are doing, I take that as a badge of honor, because we are doing what is necessary to get kids from point A to point B. You don't understand it because you're vested in a system that otherwise have kept kids out. We are almost, somebody came and they said, well, you all are, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's a whatever, right? And I'm going, because we're not trying to be normal. We're not trying to be what was. We're trying to create what needs to be to get our kids from point A to point B. So it starts with exposure and representation. It's not enough to be exposed. You can expose me, and I still don't think I can do it because I'm a woman, because I'm Black, or because I'm Hispanic. But now you expose me, and I see someone who's doing it. Our first Rocket Day, I'll never forget. We had 500 kids for Rocket Day, and I was calling around. I said, I want an astronaut. I want an astronaut. And I knew someone who knew Dr. Jeanette Epps, and I got on the phone. I said, I don't care what it takes. I want you. She said, I'm coming, right? And when I called the news station, I said, I got an astronaut coming. And even the news people kept saying, he's this, and the astronaut is coming, and he this, and where did he go to school? And I just let them finish. And I said, it's a woman. All right. And they, oh, we're so sorry. And they're like, the woman is. And then when she showed up and she was Black, the program manager almost fell off the table. Right? You got a Black woman astronaut? I said, no, a Black woman astronaut, PhD scientist. That's who we have here today, who used to work for the CIA. So whatever it is, we're destroying all the myths today. So representation matters, not only for the little Black and brown kid and the girl. Representation matters for people on the other side who think that engineers and scientists and technicians only look a certain way.
Very good. So, Dr. I'm glad you brought that up. So Shawna, help us understand the work that you all are doing, including Dr. Mackie, at like the top level. You're having impact across the country. But what do you say to parents and families who you need to help you, disrupt these systems? Like, what are some advice that you would give to a parent who's watching this and going, I need to know what I need to know so I can talk to my teachers, the principals, the guidance counselors. What advice do you give them?
Yeah, be an advocate for your child first is what I say. And, I always hear about parent advocacy, and I'm like, okay, yes, it's important. As a former, science teacher, I'm like, but I was very adamant about what was best for the children in my classroom, who I call my children. So I just believe that everything was going to work out for my daughter also. And I do think schools and educators and principals have what they believe is best in mind for every child in their school, but adding that parent advocacy piece is huge. And my example there is my daughter is luckily, she's been advanced for a while in terms of her math and science and even in English. And there was an opportunity for her to take a more advanced, a pretty high level advanced math class in 8th grade, which means she would have taken like essentially Algebra 1 and geometry in 1 year. And I was questioning if it was too much for her. I was at the time running Duke Tip, which was for gifted kids, but I was trying to not have that hat on. I was really just trying to be a parent. And so I said, before I just say my daughter should be in this class, let me ask her teacher, what does her current math teacher think she should do? Should she be in this class or not? If she says no, I'm good. She could just do algebra in 8th grade and not try to do 2 levels of hard math in one class. And I asked her teacher, and teacher said, if she doesn't talk as much as she talks, she'll be fine. Like, if you can get her to focus, she can do it. I believe she can do it. So that was my information. So now I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to, talk to the principal. I'm going to talk to the teacher who's going to teach this class. And Sophia with guidance, maybe she needs some more support. My thinking is that she's going to be in this class. And it turned into this really interesting experience, which the thing that stood out to me most when I was in this parent-teacher conference with the prospective teacher and the principal was when the prospective teacher she would have been in the class with told me that when she looked at my daughter's test scores, and the test scores went from, 1 to 5, she made a 5, but she made a low 5. And I still remember that experience because I'm sitting here like in this fight of inequity, with kids, any kid I can not even know about. And I'm sitting in this room and I'm like, is this happening to me right now with my own child? That, multiple reasons why. And I always say my daughter can do more in certain things, but there was teacher transition, all these other things. And I felt like I was sitting in the room with people who were at the end standing at a gateway instead of helping not just my daughter, but all these kids who are sitting in these math classes. Like, be ready for that, so that when you go in there, it's not the ones who just happened to have a high 5 or have the extra tutoring or have the extra resources, but you had them all year to get them ready. So it just left a place in my mouth to say, you know what, from that moment forward, I am reasonably a very active and responsive advocate for my own child, because even with good intention, there could be some gaps there. And you don't have to have all the answers, but there's a difference when you show up or you are there for the parent-teacher conference or you're asking certain questions. And so my starting point is show up for your children every day as much as you can as an advocate. And it doesn't mean you have the answers, but you're asking questions.
Very good. Be an advocate. That is fantastic. We're almost at time. Dr. Mackie, how about we give you the last word?
Well, I'm going to give Shawna the last word, but I want to add to that because at STEM Nola, we try to help parents to advocate, but to have self-agency. A lot of times when you work in low-income, low-resource communities, people don't feel empowered to advocate for their kids because they don't trust the system or they don't trust the people who are otherwise working with their kids. Now that's telling. So a lot of times now, since we're community-based and we're in the community and people see us working with our kids and working with their kids, parents are coming to us asking us, what should I do? They said this, what should I do? So now we're trying to empower the parents and give them information. That's why if you go to stemglobalaction.com and STEM Nola, we're putting a whole parent portal just so we can give parents information in plain terms so they can know what ask a teacher, so they can know what to look for in their kids, so they can know how to get their kids tested and get them in a gifted, and that's what a lot of parents need. A lot of times you look at stuff through our middle class lens, and that would blew my mind because here I am with a PhD in engineering, and my son's coming home. They say, well, the teacher said this, and I'm like, don't take your book bag off, let's go, because I know the teacher didn't say that. Like we were going to the last shuttle launch and, my sons went to school and they asked for permission to miss class. And they were like, well, they really need to be in class. And I said, any school that doesn't see the benefit of kids going to NASA and saying a shuttle launch, there's nothing you can give them that day that could compare to that, right? As a matter of fact, I'll live stream it for the entire class so the class can get what they're getting. But a lot of times parents don't have that, that fiber in them, to push back on the system. So in our model, we're trying to enable parents with information and with the know-how to be that advocate that we, Shawna, know that they need to be. But look, I know we can go on all day. This has been absolutely amazing. Shawna, I love you. I love the work you're doing. I love the Scratch Foundation, the fact that you all engaged over 200 million kids, and the fact that you're making it accessible for everybody, from language to learning styles to everything. And that's diversity, that's belonging, that's inclusion. And that's what we aspire to be here at STEM Nola. And I want to commend you for your work. I want to commend you for your commitment and say thank you for being on the battlefield. Don't forget about the little dude down here in New Orleans. But, again, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you so much, Shawna. This has been fantastic. And thank all of you for joining us on this edition of Let's Talk STEM. Please like and subscribe and follow us on all our digital platforms. And we'll see you soon.
You've been listening to a STEM Global Action podcast. Through our STEM-based programming, we put students on the path to quality jobs in science, technology, engineering, and math. Visit us at www.stemglobalaction.com. Until next time, let's keep talking STEM.